Please be seated. So, during the past couple of weeks, I've been having some trouble figuring out what I would say to you all here today. Why am I the way I am today? Sure, I could tell you about all of the little things that have happened in my life that I've failed, overcome, etc. I could justify the butterfly effect, that every little thing that has happened to me is a grand explanation for who I am today, my views, my passions, and the life lessons that I live by. I've been having trouble coming up with what to say today because those little things will never compare to the one terrible 10 of my life. On a 1 to 10 scale, the terrible 10 is the one most heart-wrenching experience of your life. I can honestly say that I am who I am today because of this one emotionally painful journey. And in order for you all to understand me and the learnings I've come to find, you have to know about my great and terrible 10. So here it is. When I was in grade 7, my dad passed away from cancer. He was the most inspiring, hardworking, and passionate individual I had ever known. I cried more in that first week than I thought was ever possible. But like I said, it's a journey, and this was just the beginning. After a couple of weeks, that's when the free food, gifts, and distractions had disappeared, and everything went back to almost normal. Almost. I found myself taking every moment and imagining how much better it could have been if my dad was there with us. For example, the day I got my boater's license. When I was 8 years old, my dad taught me to drive my very first boat. For most of my life, I had been looking forward to this day, something I could share and celebrate with my dad, a day he would be proud of me. So, when I got my boater's license a couple of months after my dad passed away, instead of being excited and taking the boat out for a ride, I spent hours just wishing for him to be there in that moment with me. What was supposed to be a fun and happy day that I had been looking forward to for so long ended up being just the opposite. It wasn't how I had hoped it would be. I was constantly comparing my new life without him to my life before he passed away. And with this mindset, not one moment was good enough to deserve my happiness. In addition, I struggled to relate to the problems of others. When I went back to school, I found myself stuck in a pool of self-pity. I lost my compassion and sympathy for others. My classmates would tell me about various obstacles they were currently facing: low grades, sports injuries, middle school crushes, and the list went on. All were completely justified reasons for their frustrated emotions. However, I couldn't find it in me to truly sympathize. I was in a bubble in which I compared everyone else's obstacles to the one which I was in the midst of facing. I thought that others' dilemmas were insignificant in comparison to my 10. Essentially, I was stuck right in between happiness and sadness. I refused to be happy because I felt as though all of my happiest days were behind me. I refused to be sad because I compared every sad situation, those of others and of my own, to my father's death, belittling all other problems. I was lacking emotion in every way, with the exception of the grief I continued to experience about the loss of my dad. Stuck in this state of monotony, I didn't cry for months, until one day when it all poured out. This day was different than my grief that I had experienced in that very first week, because I was no longer feeling sorry for myself. This heartbreaking sorrow ached for all of my dad's other family members and friends. I thought about my dad's best friends, who loved him unconditionally for 40 years. My aunts, who had lost their only brother. My brothers, who lost their mentor and friend. My grandma, who had already lost 2 husbands to cancer and now had lost her only son. And my mom, who lost the great big love of her life. There I was with my 2 best friends, and for the first time in a while, I was sympathizing for others. I will honestly remember that moment for the rest of my life, because it was that exact moment in which I became unstuck that I experienced the most influential and life-changing point of clarity. Here it goes. In physics, there exists a law of relativity. Everything is relative to something. A simple example is if you are driving in a car. You drive by your friend who is standing still on the curb. Your friend, relative to you, is moving backwards. Relative to your friend, you are moving forwards. Physicists believe that in everything, you must establish a frame of reference that you constantly compare each new problem and each new scenario to. However, when it comes to emotions, I believe we must defy this law of relativity. Happiness and sadness should never be relative. Don't put everything into perspective, just embrace it. If you are having a fantastic day, then smile and be happy. Don't think about times you have been even happier or the people out there who have more than you do, and then subsequently belittle your present day feelings. Don't do that. And if you are really upset about getting a bad mark on a math test, that's okay, because it means that you care. Last Tuesday, I played my last ever basketball game, and you better bet that I cried. I didn't compare that sadness to that of the loss of my dad. They're different, and I have a right to feel saddened by both scenarios. Don't belittle your emotions, even though it may be nothing in comparison to your terrible 10. And notice how I said your, because everyone's terrible 10 is different, because everything is circumstantial to the situation and not relative to others. We hear this all of the time. We're not always going to be the best student, the best athlete, or artist, just like how you won't always be the happiest person, the most privileged, or the saddest. But we need to stop thinking like this. We must stop comparing our successes and downfalls to those of others. Be the best that you truly can be in each moment. We all have different scales of potential. Focus on your individual scale and maximize it. Let's start with what that looks like here at school. When you get a test back, it's your test. Assess your performance from the test based on your scale to that specific scenario, including how hard you studied for it and your individual goals that you had hoped to accomplish. So let's say you received an 80, and you thought you were going to get a 75. Then go jump in the lake and radiate joy because you overcame your goal. Don't go around asking everyone else in the class what they got, because there's always going to be someone with a different scale than yours who got a higher grade. But don't let your mind think that you and the person with the highest mark are on the same scale, because it will ultimately depreciate your potential for happiness. Don't concern yourself with other people's scales. Stop comparing yourself to the class median, the lowest mark, your previous test mark. Just focus on your circumstantial scale. The same goes for that person who got 100. Don't go around asking everyone else about their lower marks in attempts to elevate your pride. Base your pride off of your scale and no one else's. So, if you got a 100 and you thought you got 102 because you thought you got that bonus question, then it's okay to be upset because you may not have reached your personal goal. I'm only using this example of test marks because we all do it. It seems to be a common topic of conversation here. But you can see that this switch of mindset can be applied to all aspects of your life. And that's exactly what it is, a switch. Something you can control, something you can decide to change. Stop comparing yourself to other people's scales. Use your own scale, that's why it's there. Also recall what had happened to me when I took my feelings and started comparing them in every which way. I lost one of my core values, compassion. And by losing this core value, I also lost a part of myself, the part of me that was constantly caring for others. Show compassion towards all. It was the compassion of my family and friends that kept me strong. And it was the exact moment in which I stopped comparing my feelings to those of others that I regained my ability to sympathize and started to regain my happiness. So don't let anything, albeit your past emotions or a variation of scales, dictate your feelings. Stop comparing. Just defy that law of relativity, because true happiness will never be relative. Please rise and sing hymn 400.